Welcome to Living Vividly, the podcast where health, wellness, and curiosity collide. I'm Jackie, the founder of Vivid Health and Wellness, your guide on this journey to living your happiest and healthiest life.
My co-host Daphne, the unconventional dietitian, is always ready to shake things up and bring a fresh perspective to your wellness journey. And we can't forget Dustin, our producer, who keeps everything running smoothly behind the scenes. Together, we'll chat with health and wellness experts along with everyday people who have inspiring stories and practical insights to share. If you're ready to nourish your body, move better, and discover simple ways to thrive, you're in the right place. And hey, if you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to leave us a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
So today we're joined by Jade Hayes. You're a mobility specialist, a health coach, personal trainer.
Yep. Kind of. So my favorite way of describing myself, a client actually said this. She was like, so who are you going to see, and what does she do? Because she was seeing some changes. She's like, I don't actually know. I show up, and she's like Mary Poppins. She like pulls this magic bag of tricks, and whatever I need, it's there, whether it's meditation or breath work or strength training or Tai Chi by the river or like whatever it is. So the elevator pitch would be, I am the holder of the owner's manual to human vitality. And it started as a joke, but I'm like, wait, it's actually kind of accurate.
It is true. Because you go into your room, for lack of a better word, your studio, and you have some strength stuff. You have your spine alignment. You have your Reiki and all your crystals, and it's just such a cool environment.
Thank you.
It's perfect for healing.
Yeah, it is. I am working with Carly Judice. She's in the UFC, and she just won her last match. And one of her coaches said, thank you so much for doing what you do. I would give her some cues and they just wouldn't land, and I must be a Neanderthal. And I'm like, no, it's not you. You're training her in an environment that is like high volume, a lot of intensity. Her nervous system is, pulling in so many other things that she can't rewire a new movement pattern because there's already so much going on. And the space I create is calm, and it offers this element where people can really drop in and focus. And so I create that space intentionally. I put a lot of intention in behind what I do and the space we're in, because you really have to go into this level of complete calm and complete settling to rewire the brain back to the body.
So if we were going to describe, not we, but if we were going to compare you, I guess, to something like a physical therapist, which is a known movement professional, the energy of the space that you've created is different than what you would get in any physical therapy clinic. But what other types of, how do your movement patterns or your training, how would it differ from physical therapy?
So that's a loaded question. Not a physical therapist. I have, years of self-education and lots of certifications.
You have like the whole alphabet behind your name.
Yeah, right. It's kind of becoming a problem because I'm going to have another one. I'm like, now what? Do I just drop
2 business cards? Like I need room.
What letter are you missing?
Business book. Yeah. First of all, I give a very in-depth assessment. Someone comes to me with a knee problem. I can't just look at the knee. The whole body is so intimately connected.
So we're talking about like pain is one of the biggest drivers that would bring someone to your
Typically,
space.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how people find me now, because that's where I started. People thought I taught yoga still, up until like last year, until I started actually putting things on social media like, how's yoga? And I'm like, I haven't done that in 6 years. So now people come to me, yes, mostly for pain.
Okay.
But I do a lot of things other than that too. So we can get into that later. But someone comes to me with pain, a physical therapist is going to go and assess maybe the knee, maybe the hip and the ankle, maybe. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say none of them do. That would be a blanket statement. But most of them just look at the knee because that's what insurance allows. You get a knee code and you have to follow this protocol for this person, or insurance doesn't cover it. Whereas I'm outside of that system, and the assessment process, you did it, is about a 2-hour process. And I'm looking at how you're breathing and how you stand on a plumb line. So I'm assessing posture, if there's any rotation or any sort of like tilting in the head. I look at all of those things. I look at your breathing. I look at different rotational movements at every single joint. I look at how your spine functions. It goes on and on. Length tension at every joint. And so like once I compile all of this information, which again takes about 2 hours, I then go and put it all together and make it make sense. And so by doing that, by looking at all of this information, I can see where the root causes of the problems are. And then we go and address that. So when someone comes to me with knee pain, I might not even look at the knee for quite a while. I'm going to be looking at, one, how they breathe, because that's going to change how the rib cage sits, which changes how they hold their center of gravity. 2, I'm going to look at the foot, and is the big toe able to meet full extension, because that's going to change their gait pattern. And so I guess I have the luxury of spending more time with each person. I have an hour. Sometimes I'll go over. But I'm not just going to get someone in, give them a protocol, and then send them out the door in 15 to 30 minutes. I spend a lot of time with people. So that's, one of the ways that I'm different.
You said plumb line?
Yeah.
Plumb line. Can you explain what that is?
It's a string that hangs from the ceiling. And so I line them up very specifically at different bony landmarks. And because they're standing at the same place every time they come, everybody stands at the same place. And I'm, lining it up to that first third of the ankle bone, the lateral malleolus. And at that point, I get to assess, one, is their posture changing? Have we minimized rotation through the work that we're doing? But 2, I get to see what's happening when they initially come to me. Because when you're just standing and looking at somebody, you may not see all these little tiny changes, but when you have that line going straight down the spine, sometimes it's not straight down the spine. Sometimes they're way over here, or their head's here. It just allows you to see the imbalances a little better.
Pretty in-depth process. It really did. I think I was in there for a little bit more than 2 hours. It was quite lengthy.
Some people, it doesn't take that long. We chatted.
I got a lot of stuff going on, though.
So, yeah, that, that too, but we talked and stuff like that. Some people are in and out in an hour and a half. It just depends on how many questions they have. And some of the assessments I'm skipping, because I'm like, I already know they need this.
Yeah.
Oh, check, we're going to have to work on that. So I just kind of make a note on my, papers, and then go from there once we get into the session. But I'm really looking at the breath, because in the check system that I'm trained in, they have a totem pole, and it's in the order of priority in which the nervous system, prioritizes the important functions of the body. Mm-hmm. So at the very top of the totem pole it's a little bird, and it's like your soul or your psyche, because if you're sad or you're mad or you're excited, it's going to change how you breathe. It's going to change how you carry yourself. If you're, depressed, you're going to have this posture, which changes how your organs sit, and on and on and on, all the way down to what they call the slave joints. So you have, which are the arms and the legs. They don't have as much priority to the brain. And so I operate according to that totem pole when I'm working with someone. Depending on the person, I may get into the mindset stuff. I can teach people to have a better growth mindset or change their perspective. I'm not a counselor, so I don't go through traumas with them. But if one of the questionnaires on the holistic health side that I provide is, what are your, biggest 5 stressors in your life, and have they been dealt with? Because if they're still holding trauma or stress in the body, one, it's going to show up in physical posture, which has been proven by science. And I find that absolutely fascinating. But 2, I get to understand what if they just got a divorce 2 years ago. That's going to tell me a lot about somebody. And I want to come back to that point of central sensitization. Hopefully we get to that in this conversation. But a physical therapist, as far as I know, everyone that I've looked at or been to or have talked to, they don't really address the breath. And that is number 2 on the totem pole. If you're not breathing well, you're not going to heal your gut. You're not going to change your posture. You're not going to sleep better. You're not going to regulate your blood sugar as well, because it's such a top priority of your brain. So if we're always in this stress breath, the first 2/3 of your lungs are innervated by the sympathetic nervous system. It puts you in a fight or flight. The bottom third of the lung is primarily innervated by the parasympathetic nervous system, which are our rest, digest, and healing state. If you're never taking a deep breath and we're always staying in that fight or flight, our cortisol is higher. We don't digest as well. There's this cascade of events that goes through the body. And so I'm looking at the optimization of breath. Can they use their diaphragm in its fullest range of motion? Are they breathing with their neck, chest, and shoulders? Because I can almost guarantee you, everyone who's ever come to me with shoulder issues, all their breath is here, and it just creates a constant tension because of the way they're breathing. Now, this breathing could have been altered 10 years ago when they were in college, because it was a really stressful time and they never changed the breath pattern. It's the hardest thing for people to change.
But is it really? I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's hard for people to recognize that it needs to be changed. But once you recognize and start practicing it, it's a pretty simple thing to switch over.
It is. So the reason I say it's hard is because they have to learn how to breathe in a whole new way. It's not just about breathing deep. It's about how do I use my diaphragm differently? In yoga, for example, they'll use a lot of belly breath. So even if we're breathing better and, think we're doing well, it's all in the belly. Our diaphragm actually attaches down the lumbar spine. And so most people don't ever get this posterior expansion of the rib cage. I have to go and literally rewire their brain. I've got my hands on them in multiple places. I'm saying, okay, breathe here. Nope, not that one. Breathe here. Nope, not that one. And over and over and over. And finally, they learn how to access the posterior part of the diaphragm to get the diaphragm to drop down. Now, that is essential for every back pain client. It's essential for everyone, but especially someone with back pain, because you can use that deep, very specific diaphragmatic breath to actually create an elongation or space throughout the spine and decompress some compressed nerves or something like that. It is hard to rewire. Once they have it, it's fine. But sometimes it'll take a month. Sometimes it'll take a week. Singers are a lot better at just switching it because they're used to using the diaphragm. But the diaphragm gets very, very quiet with people because it just hangs out here.
So explain to us what the diaphragm is.
So the diaphragm is a muscle. It sits in the rib cage, attaches to the lumbar spine, like I said. When you inhale, it drops down. And as you exhale, it pulls up.
When you say attaches, what?
Define attached.
It is connected
ligaments?
to.
Is it
It's got
If we're gonna define things,
connected to it's through a ligamentous system. So the organs attach.
Okay, because when you say it's attached to the lumbar spine, then it drops down. The lumbar spine doesn't just go, "Hey, have fun." It's stretching something.
The diaphragm is a muscle. The diaphragm, I would argue, is probably the most important muscle in the human body. Because one, it keeps us alive. If we can't breathe, we can't stay alive. It can go to sleep really easily. If we're not using something,
lazy.
It gets lazy. Or sometimes people even call it diaphragmatic paralysis. It's not
like any muscle.
Paralyzed.
Muscle.
Yes, exactly. But it also, another reason why it's the most important is because its movement is going to pump our organs. And with this constant pushing and releasing, it creates this pump that makes all of our organs. Imagine like a sponge. You're going to squeeze all the water out. And then when you release it, the water comes back in. It's kind of like what happens with the blood flow. And so if we're never getting this organ pumping, our organs are going to start to lose the vitality that they could have if we breathed and moved better.
So breathing is involuntary. Whenever you relearn how to breathe, does breathing correctly then become involuntary, or is it always going to be something you have to really think about?
So we want movement options. And this kind of goes into the mobility work that I do. If a kid jumps out of a tree, he's not going to have to think, how am I going to land to not hurt myself? Because kids' fascia is still very pliable. It glides well. It's still hydrated very well. But they still also have a lot of degrees of freedom at every joint, meaning they have full range of motion at every joint. So the brain works on the dynamic systems theory, where let's say you take a professional squatter. And he's squatted his whole life and he's got 500 pounds on his back. Every time he squats, his brain is going to choose a different line of, muscle firing. He's going to choose a different motor program. If you take a novice squatter who has never squatted before, his brain doesn't have as many options. It doesn't know how to self-organize as well. So he's going to squat, but when you measure it, he's going to use the same lines of tension over and over and over again. Now, this is true for everybody and every movement and with breathing. So we want to have as many movement options as possible. If you have all of your movement options, so the ability to breathe shallow because we're running from a tiger, or the ability to breathe deep and posteriorly, like I talked about, because we're in a nice relaxed setting, your brain is going to know when to use which option at the most opportunistic time. It's going to optimize movement if it has all of the options available. Now, let's say, I'll just use the shoulder because you can see this on camera. Let's say I'm in this kyphotic posture and I've lost external rotation, partly because my spine is, no longer in its optimal position. Well, if I don't have this line of tension anymore, I'm only going to have access to that first half of the capsule because the rest of the capsule is inaccessible to the brain. So whenever that happens, now we're only going to use this part of the shoulder for everything we do, which is what causes wear, tear, and shear. There's another piece to that of how the bone sits in the center of the joint. It's called the optimal instantaneous axis of rotation. It's a fancy way of saying that the bone needs to sit in the inside of the joint in order to rotate and not pinch on ligaments or tendons or, crush cartilage or damage a joint in any way. So there's two pieces to that. But the way we keep that OIAR is by maintaining full mobility at every joint. Rotational capacity at every joint is really essential. And it's that rotational capacity that gives our brain the ability to use all of its movement options. We have little things in our joint capsules that are called mechanoreceptors. So if we're not using something, the brain is going to put it to sleep because it conserves energy. It's really, really good at that. If we never use the back of the shoulder capsule. So let's say you're a mom.
Okay.
It's the best example I got right now off the top of my head. Let's say you're a mom, okay? And you've got a kid in the back and you've got to reach behind you to hand it a snack. Him. And you've got to reach behind you to hand your sweet baby a snack or to grab a heavy purse. If you don't have this external rotation, you're also not going to have extension. Now, let's use internal rotation for an example. Because I think it's more commonly used. Internal rotation is going to limit your overhead flexion. So I hear in the gym sometimes, you'll hear like older men past their 40s, oh, you're still lifting overhead. You shouldn't be doing that after 40 where they're doing this push. That's not true. It's only because almost everyone loses their internal rotation of a capsule first. That's true in the hip and it's true in the shoulder. Whenever muscles around a joint get tight, they're going to start to crank. And I don't know if you can see here, but that bone creeps in toward the capsule and it'll shift forward because everything is pulling us forward. It's also because of our modern day lives, right?
Say, because we're sitting at a computer or we're looking at a phone.
Exactly. And we're very rarely reaching behind us or looking up or doing, pitchers. They need external rotation, but how many of us throw on a regular basis after we're out of high school? So we're going to use that as an example, right? The internal rotation, if you're lacking it, you're going to also be lacking what you need to reach the arm overhead. It's my job to help you regain the rotational strength before we even work those linear lines. Whenever a brain...
Because that's the order you need to do it in. And if you go straight up without working out the other thing, you're going to hurt yourself.
Think about it like a clock. Okay, so we have overhead as 12 o'clock. We've reaching down as 6. Reaching forward would be 3. God, is that right? And then reaching behind us is 9. So we're always reaching toward that 3. Our brain is going to down-regulate half of the clock because we never use this stuff. And so half of those mechanoreceptors are going to be turned off, which is going to affect where the head of the arm bone sits in the capsule. Now, you can regain that stuff. I do simple mobility drills. One of the ones that I teach people for internal rotation is to bring their elbow on their knee. And then, so watching here, as I rotate my hand down, you can see how there's scapular coupling. My whole shoulder rolls forward. We've got this whole shoulder complex that is no longer independently moving from the arm to the scapula. It all moves together. That is one of the first things that I have to clear. And once we clear that and their head of the humerus can spin freely in the socket, then that's going to open the capsule space. That recreates the space that we need in order to get this overhead motion. Because when you lose your internal rotation, it's the bone getting super close in that joint. And now that's when we start to have pinching, ligament issues, rotator cuff issues, those kinds of things.
So is this primarily because of age? Obviously, as you get older, things change. Or is it more because of just because of posture and just kind of it's because of lack of use. Lack of use. It's because we don't use it. We have all of these nice fancy chairs and cars and shoes, and we don't operate like our ancestors. Our ancestors used to throw spears on a regular basis. They would drag deer out of the woods. They would climb trees, which is also rotational in nature. They would sit in a deep squat, which once you're past 90 degrees, your femur, your thigh bone has to internally rotate. How many people do you see sitting like this past 90 degrees anymore? Not many, right? That's why I'm always opting for my feet up and my hips to stay in that rotational pattern versus sitting in a very 90-degree way. Now,
our ancestors were squatting on a regular basis. So they kept that internal rotation. It's not because of age. You'll see people in the gym. Like I've seen a guy in Lafayette who could move better than I did. And I mean, he's in his 80s, probably 90s. And it's really impressive. It's just because he never stopped. So when I said the brain conserves energy, it's put those things to sleep. And now it has less movement options. And so it runs the same lines of tension. And that's what creates the breakdown. It's not due to age.
But there's a difference between that and hypermobility.
Absolutely. Hypermobility, I have to train very, very differently.
Right.
I have to teach them how to be stronger. So your strength exists on a bell curve. Okay. Let's use that as an example. You'll have, the ends of the curve are here and then it bells up. Well, that is, I'll use my bicep so you can see it. A hypermobile person, I will have to really focus on strengthening the end ranges of motion because that's going to protect the joint. Whereas someone who's very hypermobile, which I am to some degree, they're going to pop forward and kind of hang in that joint space. Well, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be there, but if we can strengthen that stuff, the more force a muscle can produce, the more it can absorb. And so if I teach you how to be very strong in this end range, it doesn't matter that you can go there. You can own it. Your brain is comfortable there. You feel strong there. And it's not going to be as subject to pulling or tearing. You're not going to hang in the joint space. Yeah, damage. And so when I train someone, I will have who's hypermobile, I'll have them hold an immovable object here. And as I pull up, you're going to feel, watch, I'll try it. So you're going to feel, try it on yourself. Like feel the experience of it. Okay. So your arm is almost straight.
Put the mic down. You're not talking. It's fine.
And you're going to pull up. Almost straight. So not quite straight. You feel how it's right here. Yeah. You can feel that strength stimulus start to respond. Now go midway and you're pulling. That's more at the middle of the bicep. Yeah. That's what everybody trains. Everyone gets really good here. Now if you go all the way and you squeeze your hand, you literally try to touch your fist to your shoulder, you're going to feel the top range of that bicep working.
My bicep's big.
You're so strong.
Go, Daphne.
I love that you whispered that.
I can't touch my shoulder. It's so big. So that's what I do is I make sure people have that end range strength because that's what keeps our joints extra resilient. If you go and fall in a certain position and you land here with this knee and internal rotation, if you've never trained this place, I can almost guarantee you're going to tear something in your knee or something in the hip.
Yeah.
But if you then go and sit here and you're pulling up with the knee and you're pushing down with the knee, your brain has experience there. And it's going to say, oh, we can handle this place. I know how to both produce and absorb force here. And so your tissues become more resilient and pliable. I don't just take someone out of pain. And there are definitely times when someone comes to me and I'm like, yes, go to a PT first and then come to me. I have certain things I can't.
Right.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. I have certain things that I won't address. But once they're out of pain with me, pain is a lot simpler than most people think. So most people they just need strength or they just need rotation. Somebody came to me who had been to a PT for quite some time. Most PTs don't worry about or don't know to focus on rotational strength. And in one session, all I did was work her external rotation of the hip. I woke something up in her brain. And the pain was gone. And she was like, this is insane. I mean, jaw to the floor. She's like, this is insane. She just needed a certain different strength input. And that's what I provide people. Sometimes I'm going to be completely honest. Like I think it takes about 30, maybe 40 years to be an expert in anything, especially the human body, right? To really say I'm an expert in this. Sometimes I don't 100% know, but I trust that if I make the brain confident and feel safe, it's going to turn that pain signal off. And I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, that is the case. So sometimes I will tell, and I'll always be honest. I'm like, look, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but let's surround the dragon. We're going to strengthen everything around it. We're going to clean up your diet and lifestyle, reduce inflammation. All that stuff helps too. And then if you're willing to play with me, let's just see what happens. I've never had that situation not work out. We don't always have to know exactly what's wrong.
Right.
We just have to kind of
support the system, support the human body.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Because our bodies are designed to function correctly. We just have to give it the tools and the environment where it can. Have you always been this jungle lady who's, got this
tell us how you
perfect
got
mobility
here.
and perfect
No.
No.
Absolutely not. I always knew I wanted to help people as a kid. And because of society, I'm like, well, how can I help people? And I have to make a lot of money. So the whole goal was to be a doctor. So I went to the pre-med track at LSU and I ended up on antidepressants. I was actually incredibly unhappy. I had great grades. It wasn't that it was hard. I really think my soul was like, yeah, no, not this path. And I didn't know that at the time. But then at one point in time, I was 2 years in. I hadn't quite finished. I had full top scholarships. I mean, everything was paid for. And my best friend then, husband now, told me he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. He hadn't told any of us. He had acquired all his gear and then said he was leaving in March. I think he told us maybe 3 months before he left. I was like, what is that? Tell me more. It's something just like this light, this like ding. Kind of felt like that, And I had to find out more. And so he showed me a documentary. And after the documentary was over, I was like, can I come? He's like, absolutely not. Like you can't drop out of school. You've got scholarships. That's ridiculous. I was like, no, I'm coming. As long as you're okay with it, I'm coming. And so he's like, if you can get all your gear and be ready in 3 months, you're more than welcome. And so, my family thought I was insane. Definitely thought I was making the worst decision of my life. My friends thought I was insane, but there was this soul calling. I was like, I have to do this. Well, when I left, I played sports when I was in middle school and elementary, like growing up. But when I got to high school, to be completely honest, I was so afraid of failure that I did not try out for anything. And I just did normal high school things that were very unhealthy. And so I got very, I was out of shape. So I'm like, oh my God, I got to hike this trail. Like maybe I should start running. And so I started running and it was terrible. It was really terrible. I was very unconditioned. And then it came time to hike the trail. And I think it was the first 8 miles of the trail. It was like straight uphill, straight downhill. It's in Georgia. And it was so intense. One of our friends was throwing up one side because he also did not do much. And I started to question, there was a little tiny voice like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? But I was out in nature and the sunlight was hitting me. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. And I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. So on that trail, I actually got really quiet. I realized I had lived most of my life according to what everyone else thought I should do or who they wanted me to be. And I kind of didn't know who I was or what even to say. Through that process, there was a lot of self-discovery. And I don't know, it was like a complete shift of who I was. I feel like I dropped the conditioning of society and I started the process of finding myself. And then we decided that we wanted more adventure. We knew where we were going. We knew where we were sleeping at night. We had this map that we could follow. We were like, you know what, let's just hitchhike. And so we hitchhiked from East Coast to West Coast. And there was 4 of us. I was the only girl and there was, my husband now and 2 of our friends. That really reinstilled my faith in humanity because there were people who looked like they didn't have much of anything, pulling over, picking up dirty people with a backpack and just giving us food. And I don't know, it was really sweet. I didn't think that I found more people reaching out to help people just because they were on an adventure than I thought I would. When we got to California, we hung out there for a little while and then I found that I was pregnant. And it was kind of like, a shell shock. I'd lived my whole life according to what everyone wanted. I checked all the boxes and then I experienced this freedom for the first time ever. And then it was all kind of taken away. And so Brian, my husband, had known about organic food and had kind of taught me about it. And at that point I was like, okay, everything has to change now because now I'm responsible for life. And we did. We came home, or I came home first. He had to do a wilderness first responder. So I came home first and I changed everything all at once. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And that's why I love coaching. I've lived the healthy lifestyle. He just turned 13. So I guess 14 years now, technically. And I know what I'm doing, but to be able to teach someone and take someone through that journey that's not alone, it's so hard to do it on your own and it feels so overwhelming. And if I would have known then what I know now, I would have done it very differently. I wouldn't have tried to change everything all at once. I literally had to learn how to cook. I wasn't a very good adult. Like I was very taken care of my whole life, which I love my family for that. But it was a whole different experience. I learned how to parent differently. I had to shop at different grocery stores, and it all just felt so overwhelming and so stressful. And I stressed so much about getting everything just perfectly right. And then, 10 years later, I learned that stress is like, if we're stressing, exactly. If we're stressing, nothing's gonna be healthy. And kind of was like, oh my God, if that was kind of upside down.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the mission that we're on too, is helping people take control of their own health and realize like bite-sized little pieces are much more sustainable than
inch by inch. Life's a cinch.
There you
Yard
go.
by yard, life is hard.
That's right.
It's true. Just trying to overhaul your entire life can be very daunting and also just not sustainable. So that's really cool.
So being a stay-at-home mom, I knew I wanted to stay home with my boys because I ended up having another one soon after. I knew I wanted to stay home with them for 5 years. I wanted to nurture them and to cultivate like that. The first 5 years of life, they're so important. I didn't want to send them to daycare. So I did. And I was like, well, what can I do? I had gotten into yoga. I was like, well, I'll take a yoga teacher training. And we weren't making very much money. We were living on a one household income, and Brian was still doing construction. He wasn't a pilot at that point. And so I went and worked with somebody I knew. I went and worked on a construction job, like doing whatever I could to make money to be able to pay for this teacher training. So I got into yoga and I loved it. I found peace with meditation, and I was like, I want to teach people this. And so the more I practiced, the better I got at the postures. But there's a lot of forward folding, and to no fault of the teachers, there's a lot of improper cueing, especially of core control and core activation. And so I'd done a lot of, I wasn't strength training at all. And I ended up herniating 2 discs. And I originally thought it was a hip thing because, you'll have your referred pain in the hip. If you herniate L4, it'll kind of start in the hip. And I would always like dig in the hip, and the teachers, not to say anything against them, but they were like, just stretch it out. It's an emotional holding. And so I would be laying in these stretches in this forward folded position. What emotion do I need to release? What have I not looked at yet? And then as I started to look deeper and deeper, the pain started, or I started to, look deeper and deeper within, doing more of these postures that I was holding. The pain started to radiate down my leg. And that's when I went to a PT, and he told me I had herniated 2 discs, not 1, but 2. I was in a lot of pain. And all the people I saw around here, PTs, chiros, you name it, they just basically told me at 26 years old, I would have to live with this for the rest of my life. And I'm not one to take, that for an answer. And so I kind of said, F that, I'm going to learn how to fix this myself, because I still loved camping. I loved sleeping on the floor outdoors. We're primitive campers. It's nothing fancy. And I had to, at this point, sleep with 6 pillows propped up. I couldn't bend over to play with my kids. I couldn't sit on the floor and play with them.
It's miserable.
Did they tell you surgery was an option?
They mentioned it, okay. And it was a hard no.
Right. I didn't know if they had mentioned
it. Not going that route. Yeah, they definitely mentioned it. And so, and if you see my spine now, like I have pretty significant degeneration, and actually slipped my L4 posteriorly, I guess about 8 months ago now. And luckily, Brandon Alamo, who's probably the smartest man, definitely the smartest man I know, probably the smartest man in the South, he put it back in place. So instead of surgery, like he put it back in place, and I'm fine.
Did that hurt?
God, it hurt being out of place. Yeah, that was more pain than I experienced in 2 natural childbirths. I mean, I don't take medicine. I don't. I'm kind of hard-headed about it. It's probably over the top ridiculous how, I'm not going to take something. I won't take ibuprofen for headache, that kind of thing.
I'm kind of the same way.
And it got to the point where I was crying, like I was wreathing in pain. And I accidentally slipped it because I was being very unmindful, working a lot and studying a lot. And I had put my iPad on a erodes treadmill, and I was seeing, like, with music in my ears, how fast I could walk and study and put together a workshop all at the same time. And I'm not in my body at this point. And I was heel striking for an hour and 15 minutes. So because I have a previous injury and I already have discs that are narrowing and the vertebrae slightly shifted, and those 2 herniations, the vertebrae actually moved out of place. So I'm not going to say that it doesn't matter what you have going on, because sometimes surgery is required. However, more often than not, the body does know how to find that homeostasis, knows how to find center again if you give it the right inputs. And with the best manual therapist around helping me, and then me reinforcing it with postural work, deep core work, and the things that I know to do, I can do jujitsu, I can run, I can jump, there's no pain. One day I'm going to like carry around a picture of my spine and be like, you're not damaged. Look what I can do. And look what my image shows.
So your discs are still herniated.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
You just don't feel the pain from it.
That's right. If you imagine a pirate ship that has like a mast and the guy wires that pull with equal tension in every direction, that's what keeps that, mast from swaying or bending or shifting. It's the same thing in our bodies. Our spine is pulled with equal tension in all of these different directions. Our bones, biotensegrity is something that I've studied, I've looked into. I've got a lot more of studying to do on this. But the people who know that we need to change the model as the way we look at the body now understand that the biomechanical model and the anatomy that we've used was great to help us understand where things are located. Anatomy was cutting things away from dead tissue. We're not studying a living human body, which is very, very different than a cadaver. And so biotensegrity is a way of explaining how the way your fascia wraps through the entire body, the way the muscles should pull at equal tension, it keeps these bones floating in space. And so we don't have these compressive forces that are causing wear, tear, and shear. If our body's balanced and our brain has access to all the muscles that are supposed to do the pulling to keep that floating suspension. And that's essentially what I did is when I went, I'll go backwards to the original spinal injury I had. I was told by PTs and chiros that, you just kind of have to live with this. So I went on YouTube. I'm like, what is functional? Not where are things located, but how do things actually work? I need to know like, how does anatomy actually function to create space? What can I do to re-strengthen, to recreate the space that I should have? One of the things that I found that Brandon's really well-versed in is Eldoa. And most people don't know about this. And I remember like I told Brandon whenever he told me Eldoa, I was like, wait, I've heard that before. And I pulled up a note on my phone and what I had typed in was French man who creates space. Yes. His name now I know is Guy Voyer, and he works with the fascial system. And you're basically...
So what's Eldoa?
I'm not an expert in this. This is something that I've used.
Oh, so it's not a technique?
It's a technique.
Okay.
Yeah, Eldoa is a technique. I will take these courses once I'm done with the school I'm in now. It'll be continual. I'll need my
Gotcha.
business book. But Eldoa is you're basically working with the fascial system, and you're creating this tension and this reaching and this tension. And you're strengthening and stretching and decoaptating, creating space in every joint. And they have one for like every joint in the body. It's fascinating. So I found that, and that definitely helped to create space. But then I found functional range conditioning, which is where I really found relief. So the way they describe it is your spine should play along like a football team. If every single one of your vertebrae, it's doing its job to bend, extend, and rotate, then you're not going to have too much stress on one spot in particular. But often you have a spine that's typically around L4, L5, and L3 in that general area where you have vertebrae that lock together. Now, if these lock together, the ones above and the ones below are going to have to do extra movement. What would happen with that football team if you took out its 3 best players and said, go play the championship? You're going to have a lot higher rate of injury because these guys are having to compensate for people that are missing. Same thing in the spine. And so I did a lot of the core work. I think it was Stuart McGill. I think I also followed his work, and I learned how to activate my deep core with his work. But then I was still flexion intolerant. I was out of pain, but I still couldn't bend over without all the symptoms reoccurring. And so then I got into FRC a little deeper. And I realized functional range conditioning. And so I realized that, I need to get these vertebrae to move independently. And so I started getting into segmental spine training, which imagine cat-cow. But in yoga, you're doing cat-cow, but you're only moving the things you're already really good at moving. You're not working very intricately piece by piece at each vertebrae, each segment of the spine. That's what I'll do. So imagine like a cat-cow position. You're in cat and you start at the tailbone and you start to lift the tailbone to the back of the head, and you're going to roll one vertebrae at a time until you reach full extension. Now you're in full extension and you start at the tailbone, or you can do the head and you roll one vertebrae at a time to move back into flexion. that's going to be one of the ways you can remind the brain that each little vertebrae has the ability to move. And so I started doing those kinds of things and unlocked those vertebrae. And now, ever since then, I haven't had pain. There's been a couple of times. That's when last podcast that we did, I had COVID in 2021. I think that was the first recurrence of pain that I had since the initial injury in 2017, 2016, I believe. But when I got COVID, which is inflammatory in nature, we were going backpacking in Colorado. We were going to camp. So we brought our tent and all the things. And I just remember feeling really tired. And like I would pack a couple things and I'd put my hands on my knees. And Brian's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'll take my oregano oil. I'm fine. I'm good." And I'm like, we're going to Colorado. Yeah. And so we did. And when we got there, we were 15,000 feet in elevation and it was incredibly cold. I don't remember how cold. It was definitely in the 40s and the wind was blowing so strong. And by the time we got there, I was feeling so sick and just weak and shaky. And I remember like sitting in the tent thinking like, this is what people must feel like when they die on Everest. And I looked down and there's a spider, and I'm a wilderness girl, so I'm not like really worried about it. But then like something told me, no, check this one out. And it was a black widow. So like luckily I did, because I could have actually died.
Yeah.
But and not with the fun of being on Mount Everest, just being in Colorado.
No, exactly.
You're going to die freezing from the cold. It better be on Mount Everest.
It better be. That's right. I need a legacy to leave.
Originally, I thought this was on Everest. So I was like, well, if you're going to go.
No, I was not on Everest. I have not hiked Everest. But so now we had to rent this cheap hotel, and I laid in the bed for a week. Then Brian got it, and then the kids had it. And so like we were there for a week. I was laying on a terrible mattress. Spider? Brian killed it.
Oh, okay.
And then saved my life.
Thanks, Brian.
Oh yeah, I'm still here alive today because of him. So laying on that mattress plus the extra inflammation from COVID. I mean, COVID I didn't have. It wasn't that bad, but the inflammation piece, I was in more pain than I had been in since the initial injury. And I remember one night I was just pacing back and forth, just kind of staring at Brian, like wishing I could lay down and sleep. And he wakes up and he's like, "Why are you staring at me?" And I'm just like, I'm crying. It hurts so bad. Well, it's kind of funny. When you're in pain, all you hear is pain. Like that's it. And so I'm not thinking, oh, how do I fix myself? You know how to do this. I'm just literally suffering. And knowing all that I know, you just get into the suffering state. And so finally, we were about to leave. We were about to drive home, and I was like, God, this is going to be miserable. Let me try something. Let me do something about it. I was on the floor for 5 minutes, and within 5 minutes, because I had already woken up all of these muscles that create spinal stability. It took 5 minutes for me to remind my brain, oh, they have a job to do. And then boom, pain went away. And then we drove home with no pain. So pain is interesting. It's not always a sign that something's actually wrong. It's a sign that something needs to be addressed. I talk about it as a smoke alarm. It doesn't detect fire, it detects smoke. There's a stress in the body, there's a weakness in the body. And that's why, I feel confident addressing pain with people, because it doesn't always mean something's torn. Now, if something's torn, I'm going to refer to a PT. That's in their scope, not mine.
I was going to say, does that go back to answer Jackie's question of breathing, where once you reteach them how to do it the correct way, if they do happen to stop, it's a lot
easier
to... Oh, yeah, wait.
Absolutely. Once you have it back when your brain map, this goes for anything, breathing, movement, it's really easy. It's much easier to access.
Like riding a bike?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or skipping. Yeah. Skipping is something that people forget how to do, which
I don't know if I could skip.
I love skipping.
I love skipping.
I used to love to skip.
It's my favorite. You'll get back to skipping. I can see you
frolicking. It also intrigues me because I've learned a little bit about the spine. My husband actually had surgery. I wish I would have known you last year. He had C6, C7 spinal fusion. He had a really bad disc herniation. And he had been suffering with it on and off for a few years. And I think he just it was at the point where PT wasn't working. Chiropractor, it honestly made it worse. But he, at first, didn't realize it was his neck.
Did they ever work on strengthening the muscles at the front of his neck?
No. Had we known you, things would have been different. But he had elbow pain and pain in his fingers for a long time. And that's what helped the doctor
determine which one. Yeah, which herniation was present.
Yeah. So now he has a big old metal plate in his neck.
Yep. And that's okay because you know what? He can get around and he can live life. And sometimes these surgeries, I'm going to say for the cervical spine, I see a lot more success and a lot less after pain than with the lumbar. Lumbar surgeries are not typically as successful as people would hope because you have a lot more movement at the lumbar spine than you do at the cervical spine. You don't really, but because of what we do as a society, you know, we're not using our neck nearly as much as we're using everything else. And we're typically looking straight forward these days,
or down.
The lumbar spine is more,
We put a lot more pressure on it, or
it's a lot less stable. One, because I'm going to say 99.9% of people who come to me do not know how to use their inner core. They do not know how to use the deep intrinsic core system that actually creates spinal stability. With that being said, now we're using our lumbar spine when we're squatting, when we're deadlifting, when we're playing with our kids, when we're sitting in our car, right? Like it's always, every time we walk, there's always this reverberation of shifting that's going on. So that's what I say, like we use it more. But when a lot of people get these spinal surgeries, it's going to create a hinge point above and below the fusion.
right.
And it often leads to more fusions or more pain or more.
Because they're compensating for that.
Exactly.
Both of my parents have rods in their back, both sides. 4 rods, 2 parents.
Oh man, it's so sad to me because it's so preventable. It's preventable. Like we don't need these things. If you lose the internal rotation at your hip, you're going to have a hip replacement at some point in time. We can train that. Like it's simple, and you don't have to spend an hour on your mat. It's something as simple as sitting in a chair, squeezing your knees together and driving your feet apart. So if you spread your feet apart, that spins your femurs in, that's internal rotation of the hip, and you're going to feel all those deep rotators working. You can be sitting at a desk job and do that, you know, set a timer. I tell my clients to use movement snacks every 20 minutes, do something like try not to just stay so stagnant.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't get an actual snack?
Nope. It's just
You get movement.
I thought it was like a reward.
If you move,
Like,
you get a snack.
That's what I thought. Oh, I like that idea.
That'll motivate me.
No, that is not a good idea.
If I'm studying a lot and I can't walk because like I actually need a book to study, and you know sometimes I'm listening to podcasts or whatever, but I'll be in my office and I'm doing wall squats on a ball. And it doesn't have to be fast and it doesn't have to be a ton of them. I'm just leaning up against a ball and I'm reading my book and I'm just making sure that I'm getting movement in because we need it. It's what we evolved on. We evolved on movement. Our ancestors, that's all they did. And because we don't do that anymore, that's why we see the problems we see. Recliners, I tell people, they're basically an early coffin. We should have natural curves of our spine. It should be about 31 to 35 degrees of curve at the top and 31 to 35 degrees of curve at the bottom. And this helps us absorb the forces as we're walking or running or jumping or whatever. But most people, you're different. Most people think a lot of people are sway back and they have too much curvature. What I actually find, and maybe it's because the people who come to me are active, they tend to have already had some sort of active lifestyle. Group classes are amazing. It gets people moving and they're amazing, but there are some terrible cues that have been born out of group classes. It's maybe because it started with a lot of people being overly arched and then the cue came in, pressure, pull your belly button to your spine, which creates a sucking in, which is not deep core activation, or pressure lower back into the floor. Well, if you do that for a certain amount of time, you're going to undo the natural curvature. And now we've got a spine that's stuck in extension, which puts a lot more pressure on the discs. So we don't want too much curvature, but we don't want no curvature either. And we can recorrect that with different exercises. So it's not like once you lost your curve, you're screwed.
Right.
But the recliner is going to unwind that natural curvature because we're sinking in and we're staying in this lumbar flexion for hours and hours every single day.
I mean, you want your spine to be straight this way, but you don't want it to be straight sideways.
The other way.
It should look like an S.
Yeah, like my neck is straight.
Yes.
And then my spine is so swayed. It is just sticking out like a tail. It's really weird.
You know, sometimes things happen because we compensate for certain injuries. And short term, it's a good thing. We need that compensation. But long term, it creates more problems. So it's important that we always go and So let's say you fall off a cliff and it's not too high, but you just break your leg. Well, the brain is going to almost like retract itself out of that part of the body so that you can crawl with a little less pain to get, to safety or to call for help or something. The brain doesn't just naturally rewire itself back there. You have to go and retrain it. And you have to say, hey, we're safe. Hey, we're strong. And then the brain's going to be like, oh, okay. And it recreates that neural connection. So now you have access to those muscles. Just like with Dustin, like he's got to relearn how to walk because he's been booted for so long. He's got to put his brain or his ankle and his Achilles back on that brain map. He's got to put his brain back into the awareness of how to use and move his foot appropriately.
It's really frustrating.
I would imagine.
What it sounds like you're saying is that pain is not so much that there is a problem at the joint, at the knee or the hip. It's that the way the signal that the brain is receiving about it.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
so rewiring or retraining the brain is
to feel safe.
More important, or maybe as important as making sure that the socket, the joint, is functioning the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah.
So you, I guess, have to do both.
Yeah, that's right. And there's something called central sensitization where the central nervous system gets, I'll say overly sensitive, it does it for a reason.
Emotional.
It's so emotional. It's so overly sensitive. Central sensitization is where the nervous system gets overly sensitive. And this can come from your mood. If you have someone who's anxious or depressed, that increases the sensitization, say that 10 times fast, of the nervous system. But so does inflammation. So does issues in your detox pathways. So does dysregulated blood sugar. So you get all these sensory drives back to the spine that are back to the spinal cord. And then the brain gets really like it's on high alert because it's like something's going on. Something is wrong. There's something that needs to be addressed. And someone in that state will actually feel pain more than someone who is in a homeostatic place. There's not a lot of stress on their body. Now, I'm not talking just about mental stress, internal stress, the body's systems.
Right.
So,
wow.
You can take 100 people in a room and you can scan all of their spines, and maybe like 70 of them will have disc herniations or degeneration or a spondy or something like that. But then maybe 3 of them will feel pain. And then you can take someone who is in chronic pain and scan them and nothing's wrong with their spine, and it leaves people puzzled. So pain is not necessarily an indication that something's wrong. It's an indication that the brain is feeling unsafe. And if you can create safety, and that's where my holistic health training comes in, is I'm not just looking at someone. This is a fun story. So I had a guy that came in, and I'm usually booked about 3 weeks out. And so he booked an assessment 3 weeks prior. This was right around Lent whenever he booked with me. And by the time he came in 3 weeks later, he's like, look, Jade, like, I don't think I need you anymore. Like, tell me more. What changed, And he's like, I stopped eating meat. And I said, well, what kind of meat were you eating? And I'm like, I love these conversations because I get to like plant seeds. And he's like, well, regular meat at the store. And I said, oh, so conventional meat. And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess. And so then I went on to describe the difference between grass-fed meat and conventional meat and how what they eat is going to change the quality of proteins and fats in the meat. And it's going to, conventional meat raises the inflammation in our own bodies because they're inflamed because of what they're eating. And because he had cut out the inflammatory meat, it's not meat that's inflammatory, it's the way they're raised. And because he cut that out, his nervous system was less sensitive. He's experiencing less danger signals in his brain, and his back pain. I mean, he could stand up straight. He can bend and twist when before he was locked up. I mean, I remember talking to him on the phone. He was like, I'm limber everywhere else, but I am so stiff and rigid. The brain will create, also, this kind of drives another point home, that the brain will often create stiffness in order to protect. So just because you feel something is tight does not mean you should stretch it. In fact, in a lot of cases, we need to figure out why it's feeling tight. And oftentimes it's because the brain is trying to stop it from tearing or ripping, or it's saying like, don't go there. If you're continually stretching your hamstring, for example, over and over and over again, and there's no change, that is a sign that you probably need strength instead. Because when you go to sleep, the brain will reset everything to its natural tone where it feels safe. And you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, this hamstring, God, I got to stretch it again. It's protecting you from something. And it could be because your pelvis is improperly positioned, or because your spine needs more support. Like your abs should support the spine and the pelvis. But if they're not doing their job, the hamstrings have to to take that double role. So they're not only operating as a hamstring, but they're also trying to stabilize the spine and the pelvis as well. And so we need to not strengthen those things because they're holding on for dear life in order to keep us upright. It's like learning a whole new language.
Yeah.
I have to teach people how to learn the language of the body, because everything your body does, and I don't care what field you're in, like it is speaking to you. The symptom is a message, and I help people determine and translate what that message is. And I don't just work with people and just like, okay, do this, this, and this. I'm teaching them. I'm an educator. I want to give people the knowledge they need to take care of their body for the rest of their lives. I do not want someone to rely on me. I don't want to parent. I got 2 boys that are enough to parent, like I don't want to have to hold this responsibility over people. I want to give them the autonomy and the knowledge to take care of themselves.
Are you the only one in Lafayette that does this?
Yeah, I am.
That's a lot of pressure.
I love it, to be honest, because it's when people find me, it's usually like, I've been to so many other people, and I don't know. I really like teaching people, and I like that. I like the novelty of it. I like kind of paving a new path, and I've actually had quite a few people reach out to me that want to learn from me, and I'm like, yes, please, let's do this. Let's expand this work, because I'm continually amazed. I didn't know what I was doing when I got into this. Yeah. I had no idea that it would help people to the degree that it has. Neither did my husband. He's like, you're doing what? Like, this, how's this going to help the family? And then he quickly realized, like, wait, wow, this is really essential and really important. And I'll never stop learning. I'm studying light right now. That is a whole nother avenue of just like, what? Just
are you reading the Future of Medicine book?
Yes. That was so funny. When you texted me that, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, you're my people. Who reads these books?
Yeah.
Like no one even knows this book exists. Exactly. Yeah. That's fascinating. One of the most interesting things that I've recently learned about light is that we, like reptiles, could actually highly benefit from having a UVA and UVB what are they called? Reptilian basking lamp.
I actually have one.
Really?
Yes.
For lizards?
I don't remember. There's a lizard on the box. We've never owned a lizard.
I didn't know if it was like a human one.
No, it was for hermit crabs. We had hermit crabs for a while.
Use it every day. You
Put
can
it
use
in my
it
bathroom and just like
in your
like what am I supposed to do?
Where do you do your work? Bring it to your office. So all of the unnatural lighting is just devoid of its full natural spectrum. And one of the things it's missing is UVB. UVB is actually really important for anxiety and depression and just mood in general. When we're under blue light, it's going to spike our cortisol. It's going to make blood sugar regulation almost impossible.
We're going to have to bring you back on to talk about light after we finish this book.
Yeah.
Because that
would be really fun.
It's so insane how important light is. And we are inside wearing our sunglasses, covered in SPF.
I've not used sunscreen. I can't tell you how long.
Sick.
Yeah.
Wait, what's fascinating? You were going fast and I had 17 questions and I was like, let me process this.
The full spectrum light.
Where was I going with that?
I was stuck on, is blue light bad? And then you went like, oh, it's bad, but it's fascinating. I was like, wait, did she say it was bad?
I start to talk really fast when I get excited, and all of these things excite me.
No, it's good, but I was like,
blue light is not bad,
and it's not the
blue light
color.
Blue light. It is the color.
So if I have a multicolor changing light,
yes, then that's
the same
more beneficial.
Like the backlight of your phone is considered a blue light.
Right.
It's called I think it's called a blue light LED pump or something. Whereas our phones, our screens, every screen we're on, it's filtered through blue light. And so you're going to see, if you measure it, a really high spike in blue light. Blue light is part of the natural light spectrum. We're going to get it at the peak points of the day, but it's also included every other light spectrum. So we have isolated blue light. Yeah, like that. Terrible.
I'm so sorry.
I'm already sick.
Wait, so like
he can't change it.
So like this is what you're like. This is the blue light you're talking about.
Well, yes, but it's also, if you look at your phone, you're also going to see other colors. But it's still coming from, I think it's called a blue light LED pump.
Okay.
Listen, I'm not an expert in light. I just started studying this.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to do a whole podcast on light.
Is this still blue light? Is what I'm asking.
Is this an LED?
That's LED.
Then yes.
So no matter what color I put it.
LEDs are higher in non-native EMFs, and yes, they are very unbeneficial for
So we have a health podcast,
my
and
house is
we
run on
beam unhealthy
We are
light.
sitting soaking
There's
under LEDs.
the best thing you can do for lighting is to get full spectrum lighting. The best thing people can do for anxiety and depression is to get a UVB and UVA, a reptilian basking lamp, and use that on a regular basis.
Putting that bulb in my, I'm going to put it in the lamp that I have by my bed. And I'm just going to lay in bed.
Yeah.
Herkle Durkle.
Yeah.
Herkle Durkle with some UV
There
light.
you go.
Or go outside, right?
Or go outside. Yeah, absolutely. I drive with my sunroof open. Like anytime I try to get as much light in my eyes because any glass is going to filter the full spectrum of light.
We've talked about sunglasses. We're like, well, we like sunglasses, but you
Only
should
at night.
look at
You should
the
only
sun.
wear sunglasses at night.
Good,
I wear my sunglasses at night.
They were on. They knew it. They
something
knew what they were doing.
so long ago.
So when people come to me, so they might come for pain, but then they're out of pain and they're kind of like, well, what else? And through the course of me training with them, they open up to me, they start talking to me, and I start just informing them on different ways that they can change their lifestyle. Or we start to talk about why your pain's not going away. And that's kind of my favorite thing because people will come to me for pain, but then like we've done a lot of work and I'm like, okay, what are you eating? Let's have this conversation. Like this might be hard, but let's look at what other things contribute to pain. And so whenever they look down that rabbit hole and they start to realize how many other things that they're doing that are unhealthy or just hard on the body, we have a stress container. So imagine this container and we have all different types of stressors. We have physical stress, which could be physical exercise, right? That's a good thing. We want that. But if our container's overflowing, that extra physical exercise is going to overflow the container and create more of a problem for our body. We have chemical stress, which comes in the form of like lots of terrible food. We have EMF stress, the non-native EMFs that come from our phones and Wi-Fi's and things like that. We have thermal stress, so think sauna, cold plunge. So we have all these different things that we're constantly bombarded with and we're constantly experiencing. Now, if your stress container is half full, go cold plunge. Unless you're a woman, you should not be cold plunging at 32 degrees all the time. Like women are very different. That was what I was
Warm
saying.
baths or
With let me go backwards real quick. The super interesting thing is that all of the studies that are done for everything are done
on men.
under, well, yes, they're on
Whoa,
men, but they're
whoa.
done under artificial lighting.
Oh.
How does that change everything? If you take an onion and you cut it in half and you put a plain glass and you bring the onion back together, it's not going to sprout because light cannot, like the full spectrum of light can't move through that glass. But if you do the same thing with crystal glass that allows the full spectrum of light to flow through, it does sprout.
Nuh-uh.
Like, how would that change everything we've studied from medicine to food to, I think
It probably doesn't matter too much because that's the only kind of light we're ever under is artificial light.
That's a good
but we can
point.
change that. We can change that. You have, I think it's called blockbluelight.com. And there's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head, but they have full spectrum light bulbs and like recessed lights that you can use.
Oh,
And
so
they
you,
have blue light blocking glasses that you can.
I wear those at night. I wear the red ones. You're supposed to wear the red ones at night.
I can't edit things. Color.
'Cause you can't see, you're like-
no, that's true.
Well, it's like everything's the wrong color. If I'm like color,
true.
You're screwed.
color
You're
grading a
doomed.
That's
video.
it.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Don't even rehab your leg. It doesn't matter. You're done.
So yeah, but going back to what you said, all of this health studies are done. They only introduced women into certain health studies in 1993. It's like a blip in time. And so that's another thing that I love to teach women is that we're not just tiny men. We're not these many men.
Stacey Sims.
Yeah, exactly. We have a whole different physiology that we have to take into account. But going back to that stress container, if we're already bombarded with lots of stressors, I'm not going to let. I will recommend that someone don't go to a HIIT class and don't necessarily train every day. We're going to have to dial back the style of training. I might tell them you need to be doing more restorative yoga or Tai Chi or meditation or just walking at the park with a friend for about a month. Let's try that. You'll be amazed at how much weight you're going to lose. A little while ago when I said I slipped my L4 and I was in more pain than I had ever experienced. When Brandon, after he fixed my back, he was like, okay, no weightlifting. And I'm like, I can't what? Say what? Like for how long? What are we doing here? And he said 3 weeks. I need 3 weeks for it to set and make sure like it holds. And so I was like, okay, fine. So I did my deep core work and I walked. And I mean, that completely trained. I have pictures on my Instagram of the amount of time I was training. I was going to the beach. So I was training. This is insane when you look back at it, but a lot of people do this. We all have done this, right?
Yeah.
5 days a week.
Ready?
Exactly. 5 days a week. Most of the time 6, where I'm doing hard, fast kettlebell flows. And I would go on the stair stepper for 30 minutes. I was in the gym for an hour and a half a day. And if you look at the first pictures, I'm like inflamed. I mean, it's fine. Like I'm not overweight, but like you can see the inflammation in my body. And then fast forward to the next set of pictures, and it was after I had that injury and I was just walking. That was all I was doing, was literally walking for an hour. There were 2 things that changed. I walked for an hour a day. I meditated a little bit more after that walk or before the walk, and I started eating in the sunlight. And I would eat my lunch every day outside because it helps you absorb your glucose better. So it's helping you regulate your blood sugar better. And I was getting first light in my eyes. So I guess that's technically 4 things, but the light piece was the 3rd. I changed those primary 3 things. I saw my abs for the first time, and I can't tell you how long. And I'm like, what? I don't have to work so hard? Oh, sign me up.
Yeah.
And I often find that whenever something negative or unfortunate, or, you have that setback, that injury or whatever, I always learn something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I carry that lesson to the people that I work with.
Yeah.
Which has been a lot of women lately. And I'm like, yeah, you're in pain. You have like elbow tendonitis and shoulder pain.
Tennis elbow.
How much HIIT are you doing? How much hot yoga are you doing? How much
So hot yoga's bad?
I'm not saying it's
Or is
bad.
the temperature stress?
It can be
Not that I'm
if you're
doing that.
overly it can be beneficial for some people. But if it's the only thing you're doing, it's going to create just as much imbalance as someone who only goes and lifts heavy weights in the gym and does not stretch or do mobility work. You've got to have like a well-balanced approach to everything you do. That's the diet. We were talking about how like carnivore, the caveman diet, like it might help someone for the short term.
Right.
But long term, we need balance in everything. And that goes for movement too.
Mm-hmm. I've also heard, this is very specific to women, but like depending on what week you are in your cycle is what exercises you should do.
Yep.
Very interesting.
I've started to sync my work. I haven't been working out much at all. I've been doing a lot of working.
Yeah.
But, when I am exercising regularly, I sync it to my cycle. And I won't cold plunge during ovulation or menstruation. I avoid those periods of time. I actually haven't really cold plunged much at all. And I love it. Like I love intense things. I love HIIT classes and I love 32-degree cold plunges. But if it's not good for me, I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. I'll do a cold shower on the certain parts of my cycle that are beneficial. And I'll go sit in the sauna and like work on, fascial release and, breathing. And God, that feels so much better.
Yeah.
And I think that we could all take a page out of that book as women, is like less is more.
Yeah. Whenever you're under immense stress, a cold plunge probably isn't the best thing. I've heard a lot of good things about just a hot bath. Just it's more healing and helps bring down your stress levels.
We need more down regulation than up regulation.
Oh I am wound up so tight, stressed out all the time. And it really does negatively impact every aspect of my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
The days that I breathe and meditate and slow down purposefully, I'm just such a happier person.
Yeah.
I don't have to lift weights every single day. And, just a walk around the neighborhood is so much better for my soul some days.
Absolutely. And better for your body too. I'm not saying like weight training is not good, but a walk is so beneficial in so many other ways as well. We need strength. I have a client who's in her 60s now and she loves to ski. And she came to me, God, what was it, like 8 years ago? And it was her birthday. And she was like, Jade, I don't want to end up like my mom. She's in a lot of back pain. Do you think you could help me? Like I want to buy myself this birthday gift and I want to work with you for a little while. 8 years later, we've gone from deep core work through mobility and like strength training. And I love working with her. She's probably the hardest working client I have. If she doesn't, she's like, nope, one more. I did that one wrong. And I'm like, do you need me? Like, but we cut up the whole time. And she just came back from a ski trip. She's like, I skied better this year than I have in my entire life. So when you asked earlier, do we have to degrade with age? No, we can improve. We can get better. And that's what I'm here to like hope to teach people in every aspect. The way they think, the way they breathe, the way they sleep, the way they eat, the way they hydrate, and the way they move. All of it is important because we are like so divinely interconnected. There is not one system that just plays alone.
Yeah. balance.
I love that. Before we let you go, we have to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests is, what does living vividly mean to you?
Living vividly to me means that you're deeply connected with this inner wisdom that each of us are born with. It's ignoring the conditions of society and truly tuning into what you know to be true. And, that might lead you down a different career path, like in my case, or not following the latest fad diet, or being in the gym and going to HIIT or hot yoga constantly, or, it's like your soul's going to kind of crave something else. Living vividly is being able to listen to that voice and then to have the courage to honor it.
Thanks for listening to Living Vividly. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. For more resources and details from today's discussion, check out the show notes. Until next time, keep living vividly.